Hi everyone, it's Kelly from the Hub, here today with our friend Will Caverly, who you may not, can you see him under that netting? That's our friend Will. He is the Director of Development for the Ephrata Public Library. Hello there, Will.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good, very good.
Excellent.
I don't know how much longer I can wear this without, it's like suffocating.
So you may be wondering why Will has that on his face. So Will, not only does he raise money and do fantastic campaigns for us at the library, but he also is a beekeeper. An apiarist, is that what it's called?
Apiarist.
Apiarist, thank you very much. So he is a beekeeper, and it's perfect timing because this week is Pennsylvania Farm Show, and they have a live bee cam, and Will does bees. So Will's going to hang out with us for a little while for several interviews and talk to us about how you can raise bees. A lot of people are doing it. Some people might not be necessarily successful at doing it, but Will is going to teach us all about bees and all the stuff. So first, let's just talk to me about what you're wearing. Like why? I mean, I've seen versions of that on TV, but what is this?
So this is actually just a mosquito net and a baseball cap, which is my basic uniform for inspecting bees. Probably in further interviews, I will wear my full veil, or at least show that to you, where it's the boxy traditional veil that you often see beekeepers wearing. But really, one of the things I try to do in my beekeeping is take it easy. And one of the ways I do that is by not worrying too much about the suit, if I can help it, not worrying too much about a veil, if I can help it. This is good enough to just not get stung in the face. Because as a matter of fact, you do get stung quite a lot as a beekeeper, but it's mostly on these. And just like cooking, these are your main tools, right? You're doing a lot with your hands, and there's a lot of people who wear big old gloves over their hands while they're beekeeping, but I find it extremely hard, and so sometimes you take the licks, but you got to do it. So this if you see me, 75%, 80% of my beekeeping, I'm probably veiled up like this.
Oh, okay. And you don't. So do you wear the suit too, or you mostly just wear the net on your head?
I mostly just wear the net on my head because getting into a little bit of bee biology here, bees tend, and these are honeybees we're talking about in beekeeping, honeybees being Apis mellifera, they are, for the most part, pretty docile. They're not going to be too cranky.
Really? Why does everyone think that you get stung? Because
you do. You do get stung. However, that as a beekeeper, you learn pretty quick to identify when they're upset at you and when things are not going to go well. And so I always tell people you have about 10 minutes. As soon as you start working on a hive, you have 10 minutes to get whatever you're trying to do, get that done. And if you don't get it done in that long, the bees will start to get angry at you. And just to make sure people know what a honeybee looks like, this is not a honeybee. This is a honeybee. You can see them, pretty much all over the place. In fact, a lot of these pictures look like they're on dandelions. This one right here is on clover.
Yeah.
Honeybees are very common in our area. However, they are not a native bee to this continent. Honeybees are not from here.
What? Well, I'm not sure. I didn't know that. Where are they native to?
So Kelly, you helpfully have a map behind your head, and
I do.
On that map, you can see that there's the Europe and Asia is one large landmass up there.
Yep, right over here.
All right, over there. Our honeybees are from Eurasia. So they are a European / Russian European / Russian type of bees. Are in the United States. Whoops. All right, all right. I'm losing the hat here.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay.
That's the Will we know.
There we go. Okay.
So so honeybees that we know here are not originally from here. They're from Eurasia. So what do we have native bees here?
We do. Kelly, great question.
That's a very good question.
Going back to here, this is a sweat bee. You'll see them often
Oh,
out and
yeah.
about. They, you'll see them, they're greenish,
They're tiny.
very small.
And
And
they hover around you.
yep, and they'll often get onto your skin and kind
Yeah.
of, they're not really biting you, but they are drinking up sweat like you see in this picture. We have hundreds of native bee species. In fact, we have so many that occasionally they'll find a new one. Actually, this
Oh,
one in the upper left, this is a hoverfly, and I see those quite a bit as well in Pennsylvania. So they came out last year. There was like a ton of them. So there are plenty of native bee species in our area, and they are prolific. You find them all over the place. However, they don't produce an agricultural product. Do they help with agriculture and they help at the farm show? Absolutely.
because
Right.
they pollinate. They go from flower to flower of whatever kind and take the pollen, move the pollen, take the pollen, move the pollen. They do
Yep.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So they're active in pollination. In fact, they're, in a lot of ways, they're more reliable in pollination than honeybees, who are kind of fickle. They'll go from one thing to another. They'll pollinate the things that they want to pollinate. But what we don't get from native bees is a product. And what product do you want from honeybees? It's in the name,
Yeah.
right? And the other product you get from honeybees is wax, which is an extremely useful substance for candles, for salves and medical, things like that.
Do all
Yeah.
bees make wax like that?
Not like that.
Okay, so they make different a different version of wax.
Yeah,
Okay.
in a future one of these, we'll talk about what you can do if you don't want to keep like a honey beehive and go through all that and wear one of these. We have some options for you that are very easy to do in your own yard that encourage native bees to come and live in your yard. So we'll talk
cool.
about that
Okay.
coming up. But yeah, a lot of them will make some kind of wax substance. They all share sort of some of those traits. So they'll do wax, they'll do pollen and collect pollen for food, and some of them even create a kind of honey that they feed to themselves. But honeybees have been domesticated, meaning we've trained their genetics over many generations to basically produce more honey than they need. And bees will do that just the way you, for instance, you will save money for next year and you'll save for a rainy day. Bees produce more honey than they need. We've really trained bees to produce way more honey than they need by domesticating them over time. And so our honeybees that are over here were brought here by European colonists, and they were brought here for the same reason we use them today, which is we like wax, we like honey. And in fact, for them, bringing the bees over here was even more important because it was a source of light, right? If you want to have a candle in your house, you're going to need some kind of wax. If you want to stay up past dark, right, electricity is nice, but
right, you think about them, I mean, now we think about them as a lovely treat to put on fruit or whatever. We forget that first they were about light.
Yes, light and energy.
Yeah.
And waxes are also a great carrier for if you're making a salve or you're making some kind of medicine. Wax is an extremely useful substance that's pretty unique. You don't find it, I mean, how many other places can you find something like wax? There's not too many.
Right.
So essentially colonists brought them over and then released them to go crazy across the continent. And this is actually something I was doing a little bit of research on once, which is that as Native Americans used to say, as they moved westward, as they were being forced out of ancestral land, they would say that the honeybees would come first and then the white men would come relatively soon after. So the honeybees, as they moved across the continent, were moving at about 100 miles faster than the colonists as they spread. So
that's fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
Not for them, but that's fascinating that they recognized that as the precursor to what would come in their lives.
Yeah, it was for them, the honeybee was this new species that they had never seen before. It was an invasive species coming in. Honeybees in the wild if you let them out in the wild, which they don't do very well for a lot of reasons right now. But back when they were new to this continent, they'd be getting into trees. So they go into any kind of tree hollow. Birds live in tree hollows. Owls live in tree hollows. You know, famously, you always see an owl looking out of a tree hollow. That's what bees do. They go in the same hollows. So there's plenty of places for bees to wildly go all over the place and get into different trees and different environments. And what happened was they became part of this ecosystem. And so now it's been several hundred years of honeybees being here unkept. And the whole time they've also been kept purposely. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but I think one of the things that folks need to realize is that, yes, honeybees stay in one spot as a creature and as a hive, right? You've got a queen, you've got her workers, you've got a bunch of wax and the famous honeycomb. This is all happening. However, bees swarm, and this is the act of splitting a hive off when it's become too big. So the same way, if you live in an apartment or house and you grow up in a house with your parents and you have kids, pretty soon it's not going to be enough room, okay? And if your kids have kids, there's definitely not going to be enough room. Well, bees do the same thing. When they've gotten too big, they will split off and create another hive by launching out a whole bunch of bees in a large cluster to fly to another tree hole or something like that. Beekeepers take that biological instinct and they use it to create new hives. So I started with 3 hives this past year, and I was up to 4 or 5 at one point because I took that instinct, and there's ways you can channel that instinct into creating more hives.
You can sort of force that behavior on them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and that can be as simple as taking the hive, splitting it in half, and putting it right next to the other one. Right? You just
so they're like next door neighbors.
They become next door neighbors, and they figure themselves out automatically, instinctually, and build themselves up. So does that make sense about how bees came to America?
So are they social? I know that they hang out, but
yes,
how does that work?
Yes, they call it eusocial, EU social, which means social, but not in the human context of a written language. But they are absolutely social animals. They really cannot survive without a hive unit. That is different from those little sweat bees I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
The little green bees, they can be solitary. They mate, and then they will go back to their respective lives, and then that's it. Honeybees, no, they absolutely require a large hive of supporting siblings and so on to do what they do. The only other bees, there are several other bees that do that, but never as a large scale as honeybees. One of them is the bumblebee. A lot of bumblebees have hives, but they're usually hives of like 1 to 200 bees. Some of the carpenter bees and things like that are also solitary. But yeah, honeybees are kind of unique. They're one of these ones where they're just super social. And of course, you also see wasps where they're making nests, and they're very social as well. They don't survive on their own.
Oh, they also can't. They have to live in that sort of congregate setting.
Yeah, and so that's why you'll see the big paper wasp nests hanging from a tree.
Yeah,
they're absolutely. They're usually started by one queen, but then they build out from there. And the queen can't just do it by herself, right? She's going to hatch out a bunch of children and have them do all the work for her. But yes.
It's one of those things. I mean, there's been lots of movies about bees and shows about bees and and like animated things about bees, and so I think a lot of people have stuff that lives in their head, whether it's true or not, about bees. But I think that queen thing is always what everybody, that is like universal, that there's this woman, this There's this female bee who she sends out her minions to do all of her dirty work, all of her hard work, but then she's responsible for managing the whole hive. Is that really what her role is? I'm really putting maybe a lot more onto her than what she is, but
yeah, well, that's interesting. That is a common idea, and like a lot of, common thoughts about insects in the animal kingdom, it's sort of true, but it's a lot more complex than that, and it's complex in an interesting way, I think, which is that I always call honeybees cranky, vegetarian.
You do always call them cranky. This is not the first time I've heard you say that.
Right. I always call them cranky vegetarian communists is usually what I call them. And the reason I call them that is that first of all, cranky, right? If you make a bee angry, it's going to sting you.
Yeah.
It's vegetarian because all they eat is nectar off of flowers and pollen off of flowers. That's their whole diet. You've got carbohydrates and protein. You're good to go with both of those. The reason they're communist, it's a feminist communism, right? Yeah. And it's fairly brutal, and it's all about the survival of the whole rather than the survival of the individuals. So the queen, yes, she is the one who's the mother. She's laying between 1,000 and 1,000 or more eggs a day, and she's going around that honeycomb, pop, 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 till you can watch her work sometimes when you pull a frame out of the hive. And I'll bring some frames in so we can look at those for another session. But she is not let out, right? She goes out and she mates with other bees from other hives, males from other hives. And when she comes back from that, she doesn't ever leave again. And she is a prisoner to be laying eggs. She does not receive a break. And if she does not pull her weight, so if she, like, let's say, as happens in humans, there's sometimes sterility, or like if she's not able to birth eggs, they will kill her.
The other bees will kill her.
Her daughters will murder her, right?
Oh.
So if she's not performing up to speed, she's done. They will replace her with another queen. So it's very much, she is not truly in charge, but neither are the workers, because you think the workers are in charge, but they can't lay eggs. They can't lay fertile eggs. There's a whole complicated thing I'm not going to get into, but they are not bringing new workers into the fold. So they're really at the mercy of the queen. But at the same time, they live about 6 weeks. A worker bee grows up, does its work, and is usually dies at its job, right? It's on a flower and somebody steps on it, or it gets hit by pesticide, or it just falls apart. You see a lot of worker bees who at six weeks old, they're missing multiple limbs. They might be missing an eye. They do their work until they drop dead on the job. There's no goofing around or like, okay, I'm going to like rest and put my feet up on Sunday. Like,
right. They have a job to do and they do it every day.
And they do it every day until they're dead. And with male bees, there's a certain percentage of the hive, not very high, maybe at the most 1 in 10 bees are males. And they actually don't do really any work. They sort of wait for their opportunity to go out and try to mate with a queen from another hive. So that way there's not mixed genetics. You don't have her mating with her sons, right? So they have mechanisms about distance and smell that they use to make sure that doesn't happen. But the males, when they go out and they mate with a queen, they get ripped in half during the act and die. So, and they get eaten all the time because they don't have stingers. So one time I watched a chipmunk hang out outside of my hive once and wait for drones, the males, to come out and just grab them and ate them. So they have a terrible, fairly short life, which is, a lot of stress, and then they die. And at best, they're dead. Like at best, if they accomplish their mission, they're dead anyway. So it's, communism political arguments aside, this is very much about the continuation of the society.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? Everybody does their job. If you don't pull your weight, you will get kicked out. In fact, those drones at a certain point of the year, when they decide there's no more mating going on, we're not going to bother sending anybody out, they kick all of them out to die on the front deck of the, to die of exposure. And they'll this is fairly disgusting, but they will, you'll watch the bees carry out children that aren't up to speed. So they will abort children along the way that are not maybe not developing correctly, and they will rip them right out of the crib and throw them out the front door. So it's a very brutal society that's very much focused around keeping everybody going and keeping everybody in service of the whole. So that's why I call them cranky vegetarian communists.
I would have to say that's 10,000% accurate.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And like when you look at them and you look at a bee society, you realize how good you have it.
Yeah, I think that people who saw the Bee movie thought, that was life. The Bee movie is, not science.
Not really. I mean, it's a funny movie, and it's what Jerry Seinfeld, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's not. It's kind of a mess. it's kind of a mess. I mean, he falls in love with a human woman, so I mean.
Well, right. There's a whole other level there. Right.
Something else going on there.
I have to say, Will, this is absolutely fascinating. So, just so that all of you know who are watching, Will's going to be here for a while. We're going to talk about stuff, and there is also another ulterior motive we have here.
Yes.
Because we have some interesting news. Will, do you want to spill the tea?
Yeah. Well, we are with the library won a grant a little while ago, almost in 2019. I think it may have been 2019.
It was because I found.
And yes, absolutely.
I was so excited.
Forgot all about that. I didn't give you enough credit. Yep, you found it. Good. And we, from the Whole Foods Foundation. So if anybody knows the Whole Foods grocery store, they give out some money to purchase beehives for schools and libraries. And so we are able to put a beehive in the library that will be a real working beehive. And it was a shame we didn't get to put it up last year, but people have heard about the cough that's going around, so they know that there's been some issues with getting it done. But we are really looking forward to this year and getting that installed. For people who wonder how it works, essentially think about the page of a book. If you lay a book out flat, you will have pages that fold up and down. This beehive essentially hooks to the wall, is the flat book part, and swings to the side so it can be nestled right up against the wall, and that way nobody can bother it when it's not in use, and then pulled out so that people can view it from both sides when you're doing a demonstration. So what we're hoping to do is install that in a place where it can be covered up when it's not in use and when we're not doing an inspection or anything, and then have kids and families take a look at it when it's there. And how do the bees get in and out? How do they don't fly around the library.
Right. People, they're not flying around
around the library, and we're going to put them in a spot where we can seal them up if they do start flying around.
Yeah.
They're going to be going through the wall. So we're actually going to have them exiting through a little pipe that goes through the wall, and then they can fly in and out of the library as they will, and hopefully go to pollinate our community garden.
Yep.
Also, bees can travel up to 2 miles, so they can hopefully be hitting up everybody's houses in Ephrata as well.
So we're doing these interviews first because it's really cool to learn about stuff, but we really are getting excited about having this beehive that you can learn from. I mean, there's a majillion things that Will and I have talked about already that you can teach kids, you can teach families, you can talk about entrepreneurial stuff and agricultural stuff. It's absolutely fascinating. We are super excited. So we're going to meet with Will again and talk about other bee things, and keep your fingers crossed, keep your eyes open that you can, if you're seeing your bees out there. Oh wait, we're not seeing bees out there. It's winter.
No, you'll probably, I mean, on a nice warm day, I think it's going to get up towards 50 degrees later this week, you might start seeing them. If you put out some sugar water, they're probably going to come visit you. So keep an eye out for them, and it's really going to start up in March and April.
Yeah. So be kind. They do a lot of work out there.
They do. To diminishment and to death, in fact. Right.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah. Thanks,
see you, everyone.